Remnant 2's patch is absolutely massive. I've already posted a video highlighting major components of the patch, including hundreds of gun changes, archetype changes, and much more. If you haven't checked out that video, the link will be in the description box down below. And in this video, we're going to be covering the massive overhaul that mods, mutators, trinkets, and relics received. Let's dive right in because I have a whole lot to show you. We're going to start out with mods. For blood draw, fixed an issue that sometimes caused blood draw to not deal damage. This occurred way too frequently in my experience, so I'm happy to see this right off the bat. For the mod Bore, increased duration from 6 seconds to 10 seconds, increased weak spot modifier from 150% to 165%, reduced the charges from 2 to 1, and increased the mod cost from 500 to 750. The dev stated that with the increased duration and overall damage increase, we felt that Bore needed a bit more of a cost. The reduced charges to allow you to get back to the action without needing to manually deactivate. There were a lot of broken interactions with having 2 Bore charges, so this is probably for the best. Energy Wall. Increase the base size by 25%. Familiar. Fix an issue causing Familiar to attack summon minions. Fargazer is seeing 2 major bugs being worked out. Fixed a bug allowing more than 1 Fargazer at a time, and no longer scales with status duration increases, which just dealt insane amounts of damage. For Firestorm, properly scales with mod duration bonuses. For Night Guard, damage type changed to physical plus mod, but it no longer applies curse and it no longer triggers melee mutators. I can't lie, this is kind of heartbreaking for me. One of my favorite interactions was having shielded strike on my melee weapon and having the swords trigger it. The devs noted that curse was unintentional because players do not apply blights on enemies. Fair enough. Ring of Spears. Reduced the cost from 1800 to 1250. Added melee damage to ring spears, thrown spears, and recalled spears. Added explosive damage to AoE upon return, increased the projectile speed from 3000 to 5000, and reduced the return time from 0.5 seconds to 0.25 seconds. The devs noted that, due to the high original cost, Ring of Spears didn't see much use. We lowered the cost and added a few extra sweeteners to enable more combos. I'm definitely excited to try that one out, but not as excited as I am to try out Rotted Arrow, which is getting a huge overhaul. Increase the base impact damage from 20 to 75, increase the impact weak spot modifier from 50% to 125%, increase the explosion damage from 60 to 100, reduce explosive range from 4 meters to 1.5 meters, increase the projectile speed from 5,000 to 12,500, remove the damage over time, and reduce charges from 3 to 2. The devs note that, in our desire to better distinguish explosive shot style mods from each other, Rotted Arrow gained more of a focus on precision. It hits much harder against weak spots and it gets to the target much faster. However, it's also more focused on a single target as opposed to a wide area of effect. For Scrap Shot, they removed the original Caltrop's unique damage over time behavior, they increased the bleed damage from 220 to 400 over 10 seconds, and they reduced the slow duration from 5 seconds to 3 seconds. The devs note that this is more about consolidating what the mod is meant to do. It has a much stronger bleed and retains the slow but for a shorter duration. It's also part of our desire to help separate slow mods from each other. More to come on that front. Speaking of that front, they reduced the enemy damage reduction from 15% to 10% for Song of Yfair. The final mod being changed is Voltaic Rongeur, which properly scales now with increased mod damage bonuses. That's a win right there. Moving on to ranged mutators. There were some large discrepancies in power between the many ranged mutator offerings. Quite a few were retuned and rebalanced while others were reworked. Our goal has always been to enable more build options and build variety. You're going to see quite a few nerfs and way more buffs in this section. For Extender, increased capacity bonus from 40% to 45%, increased reload speed bonus from 15% to 20%, and fixed an issue where Extender remained on or visible on unequip. For Bullet Weaver, no longer affects both weapons, so that's just a bug fix. For Momentum, reduced the critical bonus per stack from 3% to 2%, which is giant. The devs note that this change was to bring it in line with many of the other ranged mutators as it was providing an incredibly powerful damage increase for low investment. Definitely don't disagree there. For Lively, rework the primary behavior to factor base damage dealt instead of kills. The devs note that base damage dealt over on-kill is a more player-friendly option in a game where you may not always have a scrub enemy to kill. Love that he called him a scrub. This helps a mutator become immediately more viable. For Twisting Wounds, increase the bleed duration from 200 over 10 seconds to 200 over 20 seconds. For Transpose, they reduce the range damage bonus from 20% to 15%, reduce the duration from 20 seconds to 15 seconds, and they adjusted text to clarify that net ammo gain is what activates the trigger. The devs note that generated ammo was not originally designed to trigger transpose, However, we thought it was cool, so we adjusted the duration and power and allowed this interaction to exist. I love that. It does not work on ammo shifting from reserves to primary. It has to be a net ammo gain. For Time Wave, they reworked the primary to increase range damage to slowed enemies. They reworked the level 10 to apply slow on mod usage for 5 seconds, which has a 10-second cooldown. And they increased the range of slow application from 7.5 meters to 10 meters. The devs note that Time Wave was providing way too much slow for very little investment, especially considering mods like Prismatic Driver and Stasis. They reworked it so the slow application was more balanced and the primary effect was more versatile. For Refunder, increased max refund chance from 35% to 50%, but they reduced the level 10 bonus from 50% to 25%. It does note that it's basically a ton more ammo. While it's not a highly desirable mutator due to many other options featuring damage bonuses, the mutator can now assure you very rarely run out of ammo in most cases. Fair enough. For Failsafe, increased maximum mod damage from 20% to 25%. Ghost Shell getting a huge buff, reduced the consecutive weak spot hit requirement by 1. The devs note that it is a very minor change that should see immediate results. However, this is definitely a mutator we're watching with a close eye. I don't blame them there. That sounds like it has potential. For Feedback, they increased the level 10 bonus from 10% to 15% damage dealt into mod power. I thought it was fine at 10%, so that's huge. For Deadly Calm, increased the ramping damage bonus from 20% to 25% after 3 seconds. For Battery, fixed an issue that sometimes applied all stacks for minimum mod amount spent, and fixed an issue that prevented stack application from calculating properly. For Spirit Healer, reduced the mod power requirement from 500/300 to 150/50, they reduced the healing per mod spent from 5% to 2%, and they increased the duration from 5 seconds to 10 seconds. The devs note that they're making Spirit Healer more fluid by allowing it to activate more often. The healing amount has been reduced to balance it out, and the duration increased to make it more viable overall. For Ingenuity, they reduced the max heat reduction from 50% to 30%. Wow. They increased the maximum reload speed bonus from 50% to 55%, and they increased the max reload speed heat range from greater than 90% to greater than 85%. I agree with them in this note that the heat reduction was definitely over budget, so it was reduced while giving some love to the other bonuses. For Sequence Shot, they increased the buff duration from 3 seconds to 5 seconds, but they reduced the total stacks from 20 to 15. The devs state that Sequence Shot has always been for providing the player with a second charge-related mutator in case they want to run 2 charge weapons. It was being outshined by Supercharger, so they gave it a few more tweaks to give it a bit more power. For Bottom Heavy, they reduced the baseline fire rate to 7%, but it has a max of 25%, and they changed the level 10 bonus to 1.5% reload speed per 10% magazine missing, max 30%, that is ginormous. The devs note that it's a slight adjustment to the fire rate and a significant quality of life update to the reload speed bonus. Yeah, I'd say so. For Bottom Feeder, it is no longer called Bottom Feeder, it's actually now called Spirit Feeder. They've reworked the design. Reloading now increases the damage of the attached mod by 25% for 5 seconds, holy shit. And at level 10, casting the attached mod increases reload speed by 25%, Jesus! Devs state that Bottom Feeder turned out to promote a clunky playstyle that was a slog to set up. Once active, it blew most mutators out of the water for its very specific application. We decided to rework this one completely to give players an additional source of mod and reload gameplay. That's going to be insane with Corrupted Sorrow. For Fetid Wounds, reduced corrosion from 200 over 10 seconds to 75 over 10 seconds. Damn. They also added interaction with Slow, which is now one of the 5 core status effects along with Bleeding, Burning, Corroded, and Overloaded. For Sleeper, they reduced stow time requirement from 7 seconds to 5 seconds, and they increased proc duration from 3 seconds to 5 seconds to 5 seconds to 10 seconds at max. That's pretty huge. For Dreadful, fixed a bug preventing it from rewarding the damage bonus, probably useful. Reduced the gray health requirement percentage from 10% to 5%. They also reduced the damage bonus from 2x4% to 1x2%, which gives a max of 20% at 50% gray health. And they increased the reload bonus from 15% to 25%. Along with this, they fixed an issue where Extended remained on and visible on unequip. I'm not sure what that has to do with Dreadful. The devs note that fixing the bug on this one will help, but also making it more granular of a damage increase should make it more noticeable without having the full 10% gray to proc. Total damage bonus is completely unchanged, but now it works. For Prophecy, they changed the level 10 bonus to movement speed per stack. The devs stated that this was adjusted to give the mutator a more cohesive feel. The mod cost reduction was basically the same as additional mod generation. Moving on to melee mutators. Melee mutators also had some large discrepancies in power that we wanted to take care of. Like range mutators, the goal is to provide more build options and overall variety. Lots of adjustments here for both balance and usability. For Vampire Blade, increase the maximum melee bonus from 25% to 30%. For Reinvigorate, increase the level 10 charge melee bonus from 15% to 20%. For Overdrive, they reworked the base effect to scale with the level, they changed the duration of base effect to be static, and they removed the critical damage from base effect, which is kinda huge. The devs note that the critical damage bonus pushed this mutator well out of range of most other options, so we made a few adjustments. For Striker, fixed an issue that prevented stacks to properly decay over time, and it's adjusted so stacks now fall off one at a time. For Misfortune, fixed an issue preventing unique status effects from properly calculating, increased the maximum damage from 5 to 8% to 6 to 10%, and increased the level 10 duration from 2 to 3 seconds. For Steadfast, they reduced the damage reduction from 10 to 20% to 5 to 10%, that's fair. They stated that the pure damage reduction bonus was granting too much defense for a single mutator, especially one which allows all grey health conversion while charging. Yeah, 20% DR is a shit ton of DR. For Disengage, reduce strike requirement from 5 to 3, and increase damage per stack from 10% to 15%. The devs note that we made Disengage easier to trigger and increased the damage bonus to make it a little more enticing. For Transference, they reworked the level 10 to increase reload speed by 50% after ammo transfer. They stated that the level 10 bonus was changed to make the mutator more thematically cohesive. Transference gives you the ammo, and now you can utilize it quicker. For Vengeful Strike, increase the minimum damage bonus from 20% to 25%. For Resentment, increase minimum damage bonus from 10% to 15%, and they increase the maximum damage bonus from 30% to 35%. A nice little buff there. Although I'll miss the interaction with the swords and shielded strike, they've given it a reasonable buff. They increase the max per strike shield bonus from 4% to 5%, they increase the max total shield bonus from 40% to 50%, but they reduce the duration from 10 seconds to 5 seconds. They state that it's an overall buff, but you're going to need to keep attacking to maintain the shield for an extended period of time. Usually when I use it, I'm just spamming it anyway, so that's fine. For Weapon Lord, increase the strike bonus from 10% to 15% per stack, reduce the strike bonus duration from 7 seconds to 5 seconds, and reduce the strikes required for level 10 crit from 5 to 3. The devs state that, with a reduced cost to trigger the level 10 bonus, Weapon Lord is going to reward those with a more melee-focused setup. For Dervish, they changed the level 10 bonus to base damage dealt instead of on kill, which is definitely a running theme here, and they also removed the level 10 cooldown. They state that it's another case of replacing on kill with base damage dealt to make this a more player-friendly option. Shocker getting a buff, what? Reduced strikes required to proc from 5 to 3? Sure. For Opportunist, critical buff now lasts for 2 seconds instead of next melee hit. For Tainted Blade, they reduced the damage from 500 to 250, they reduced the duration from 20 seconds to 10 seconds, and they reduced the max damage bonus from 10% to 8%. For Guts, fixed a bug preventing maximum crit damage from being attained, and they adjusted the level 10 melee critical damage from 2.5% per 10% gray to 0.5% per 1% gray. The devs note that this is a bug fix which now makes the mutator more viable, seeing as it does what it says it does. It was previously locking the crit to a low value and thus not making any sort of real impact. Now it does. For the final mutator, Executor is going to see an increased max range from 10 meters to 20 meters. Moving on to the absolute meat of this entire patch, we're going to go over the amulets, and there's a lot of changes here. The devs state that amulet adjustments are a tricky endeavor. Damage is king in the next slot, and it's very challenging to entice players to pick anything else, which is understandable. Our priority when making balancing adjustments was to ensure that there were proper trade-offs for damage bonuses. If there's an all damage bonus with no requirement, then it'll generally be a lower bonus than if there were a condition needed to enable it. We looked through each amulet and weighed the pros and cons to better adjust the power budget. For all other non-damage trinkets, we looked at increasing benefits and reducing penalties where applicable. We hope this inspires you to try trinkets you may never have built into. Let's see what you come up with. And you better come up with it fast, because right off rip, Abrasive Whetstone, reducing critical damage bonus from 30% to 15%. The devs note that as one of the very few multiplicative damage bonuses, Whetstone scaled way out of proportion with almost every other trinket. This change brings it more in line and still provides a solid multiplicative damage bonus, which rewards building into it. Ankh of Power, this one surprised me, but reduced total all damage bonus from 30% to 25%. The devs note that the Ankh is an excellent well-rounded all damage amulet. The slight reduction to the bonus was to bring it in line with many of our other adjustments. Let's see what they are. Birthright of the Lost, increased exposed debuff from 10 seconds to 15 seconds, and it sounds like it's getting a general 10% bonus to all damage. I think they might be onto something here, as exposed enemies now increase incoming damage by 15% from all sources as a flat rate, as opposed to the original 24%, 16%, and 8%. It's better overall. Trust me. For Butcher's Fetish, reduce the duration from 15 seconds to 5 seconds. To keep the power of the item while maintaining more of a melee focus, the time reduction pushes this out of the pure range camp. It's an incredible neck for melee and for weaving, but with the original duration, it was outperforming almost every other trinket in the game. With the recent changes to other trinkets, this adjustment allows melee enjoyers who weave in ranged, mod, and skill damage to still greatly benefit from the full strength provided. Cost of Betrayal getting a very necessary buff. It increases the damage bonus from 20% to 25%, it increases the damage taken penalty from 20% to 25%, and it reduced relic recharge delay from 30 seconds to 15 seconds. The devs state that, more damage, more pain, and they half the recharge delay. Now you just need to survive to reap the benefits. If you weren't surprised before, check this shit out. Daredevil Charm no longer gives you an extra damage taken penalty. Holy shit. They also slightly increased the movement speed buff per missing armor piece. The devs note that the penalty for not wearing armor is already huge. That's true. We removed it and rewarded additional movement speed to fuel your risky ways. Decayed Margin, blowing my mind. It increased melee damage from 25% to 35%, and it increased lifesteal from 1.5% to 3%. I mean, what? Death's Embrace reduced all damage bonus from 20% to 15%, but it added a 10% all damage bonus when below 50% health. 25% max. The devs noted that it's a total damage increase when below 50% health. For Death-Soaked Idol, they increased the damage bonus from 5% to 6%, and they added an interaction with Slow. A great buff. Difference Engine getting another buff as well, increased lifesteal value from 1.5% to 3%. For Downward Spiral, they increased the range bonus from 3 to 4%, and the melee bonus from 4 to 5%. Incredible. For Emergency Switch, they increased Relic save chance from 35% to 50%, and they reduced the cooldown from 60 seconds to 30 seconds. The devs note that using an amulet that has no damage bonuses is usually a tough sell, so the Relic save chance was increased and the cooldown reduced. It could save your life. Unironically, I rated this an F in my amulet tier list, but with another buff we're going to go over later, you could literally have unlimited relics, so we'll check that out soon. For Energized Neck Coil, Overload can now properly activate the explosion. They fixed the explosion damage calculations to be more accurate. They reduced status damage bonus from 25% to 20%. They enabled explosion size to scale with amplitude. And they reduced base explosion range. The devs note that we found Energized Neck Coil calculations to be way out of line. The calculations are more reliable now. However, the DPS increase is still very respectable. Every time I use it, it's just like not working properly, so guess it's time for another try. For Full Moon Circlet, it increased the range damage bonus from 20% to 25%. Cool. For Gift of Euphoria, they reduced the stamina threshold from 25 to 20, they reduced the duration from 7 seconds to 5 seconds, and they adjusted it so the stacks fall off one at a time. They state that it's an all quality of life adjustment to make this trigger more often and remain active for longer. Gift of the Unbound, man, the most memeable amulet in the entire game, just became legit. Instead of removing max health, which is, that was just insane, they added 5% movement speed per burden lifted. That's exactly what I was asking for, literally, that's hilarious. They noted that Gift of the Unbound has been unbound. Great move. Gunfire Security Lanyard, they increased the rate of automatic ammo fill. They stated that previously, the lanyard only had a small number of specific applications. With an increase to the ammo fill rate, you may find that there are more ways to avoid having to manually reload your firearm. In most cases, it won't give you the damage of the heaviest hitting amulets, but always having bullets available feels great. For Gunslinger's Charm, increase the reload speed from 20% to 25%. The devs state that it's more competitive for low capacity weapons that have to reload often. Hyperconductor getting a major buff. Reduce the skill cooldown penalty from 50% to 25%, and remove the mod generation penalty. This is going to be crazy with Invoker. The devs state that another amulet had some specific applications, but never quite caught on. The penalties have been greatly reduced. It's time to shine. Oh, there it is. Try it with Invoker. For Indignant Fetish, they removed the enemy damage requirement, which works on any damage taken now, and they reduced the all damage bonus from 25% to 20%. Along with that, they reduced the duration from 20 seconds to 15 seconds, and they fixed a case where buff remained on unequip. Dev stated that changing enemy to entity allows players to trigger the amulet themselves. It's incredibly easy to maintain, especially with Atonement Fold. For Inner Overcharger, increase the movement grace period from 1.5 seconds to 2 seconds, and they also clarified the initial standing still duration requirement as 0.5 seconds. Dev stated that it was a strong amulet that had a strict requirement. It has been loosened up enough to give you more breathing room. Jester's Bell is getting a nerf where they've reduced all damage bonus from 20% to 15%. Get wrecked. For Kinetic Shield Exchanger, they increased the mod generation from 15% to 20%. Very minor. For Lamir's Sensor, they reduced the mod cost penalty from 15% to 10%. For Leto's Amulet, they increased the stamina cost reduction from 30% to 35%. For Necklace of Supremacy, they increased the full health damage bonus from 25% to 30%, and they've reduced the time to proc from 7 to 5 seconds. Sick. Dev state you should get good, and if you do, you'll get rewarded. Consolidating many don't get hit options to 5 seconds. Love that for the game. Nightweaver's Grudge getting a very necessary nerf, where they reduced the critical chance from 20% to 15%, and increased the range from 15 meters to 20 meters. So, gets a buff to counter. Dev stated that the Grudge shined above almost every other amulet, so the critical chance reduction allows it to stay strong, but now it has a lot of competition. It certainly does. For the One-Eyed Joker idol, they reduced the stamina cost penalty from 30 to 15. I think it's still a meme, but at least it's heading in the right direction. Plus, I love memeable shit, so. For Onyx Pendulum, changed the bonus from 25% additive to 1.2x multiplier, and they've reduced the threshold trigger from 150 base damage to 100. The devs state that this is one of the only multiplier trinkets in the game. The potential damage is much higher than the original 25% additive bonus. We're gonna have to find out together, but it sounds like it's a lot more powerful. For Samoflange, I really liked Samoflange before, but now it's way better. They increased the damage reduction duration from 2 seconds to 5 seconds. The devs note that it's another amulet that has a strong effect, but it's hard to justify when there are so many enticing damage options. This change allows it to be exceptionally good at what it does. It may stand out in a few more builds. It's gonna do great in builds that can get away from enemies. Jade Bloom Crystal is getting a buff as well, increased physical and elemental damage bonus from 30 to 35%. For Stalker's Brand, they've increased the base range bonus from 10% to 12.5%, which equals a max of 25%. For Soul Anchor, they reworked it to increase all damage by 20% while at least one summon is active. For Twisted Idol, they increased the encumbrance reduction from 15 to 20, and last, one final nerf. For Whispering Marble, they reduced the all damage bonus per Bulwark stack from 3% to 2%. The devs noted that it was an incredible amulet that grants both damage and defense. The damage has been reduced, but the defensive bonus remains untouched. It was so hard not to use this in Dried Clay Ring, to be honest. They were just so powerful together. This is for the better. Moving on to the largest section in the patch notes, we're finally going to go over all the ring changes. For Acid Stone, increased acid damage bonus from 10% to 12%. For Ahane Crystal, it used to be multiplicative damage, and now it's going to be additive damage. They've also reduced the damage per stack from 5% to 4%, but they did add interaction with slow. For Akari Warband, they reduced the crit chance from 15% to 10%, and they reduced the critical damage bonus from 15% to 10%. For a Terry booster, it now applies benefits to both heavy carry and turret mode. For Atonement Fold, they reduced the critical bonus from 10% to 5%. Even without the crit chance bonus, Atonement Fold turned out to be one of the most interesting rings we've ever created due to how many things it activated with the auto bleed. We reduced the critical chance slightly so that the core focus remains self-activation, but overall, it's still a super versatile ring. For Band of Accord, increased ammo bonus from 25% to 50% per ally. Devs note that teamwork makes the dream work. For Bit of Memento, they added 33.5% health to Grey Health conversion on skill use. Sounds like it's been reworked. Devs note that it's part of our drive to make more Grey Health build options available. Many things combo with Grey Health, and even more to come. For the Blackout Ring, they changed it to increase reload speed by 3% per 20% of the missing magazine, which maxes out to 15%. They state it's just a quality of life simplification. It's easier to understand and more versatile to offset the slight reload speed reduction. For Blasting Cap Ring, increased explosive damage bonus from 10% to 15%, so that's a huge bonus. For Braided Thorns, it's been changed to grant 10% critical chance, and they removed the on-kill behavior. The devs were wise to quote Drake here. For Bridge Warden's Crest, they increased the melee damage bonus from 15% to 20%, and they increased duration from 7 seconds to 10 seconds. Still waiting on that flop build. For Burden of the Audacious, they increased the healing on perfect dodge from 20% to 25%. For Burden of the Destroyer, they increased the range penalty from minus 25% to minus 35%. The devs note that, in many of the cases where Destroyer was used, the range burden didn't come into play. We increased the burden to make it a bit more of a burden, and are still keeping a close eye on how things unfold. For Burden of the Divine, increased damage penalty from 10% to 15%, and reduced shared healing from 50% to 30%. The devs note that the burden was not a large enough deterrent for the sheer power of the shared healing amount. Reduced it to make a bit more of a commitment. For Burden of the Follower, reduced mod generation from 50% to 25%. The devs note, just like the Burden of the Divine, the sheer power of the bonus was dwarfing the burden aspect. Instead of making the burden more painful, we dialed in the mod gen. Yeah, that is a lot. For Burden of the Gambler, reduced critical damage bonus from 20% to 15%. For Burden of the Mariner, reduced skill cooldown penalty from 25 to 15%, and increased mod generation from 10% to 15% per skill on cooldown. For Burden of the Sciolist, reduced ammo reserves penalty from 25% to 20%. For Cataloger's Jewel, increased mod per second from 8 to 10. For Celerity Stone, increased consumable use speed from 20% to 25%, and fixed a bug causing double speed for relics only. For Compulsion Loop, increased duration from 7 seconds to 10 seconds. For Conservation Seal, increased max save chance from 25% to 50% at 50% health. Remember when I was talking about Emergency Switch? That's exactly what I was referring to. You can get a 100% chance not to use your relic. For Crimson Dreamstone, increased damage bonus from 1 to 2%, reduced stacks from 15 to 10, reduced duration from 10 to 5 seconds, and stacks fall off one at a time. The devs note that it's buffs all around. Very useful for crit and skill builds. For Deep Pocket Ring, increased reserves from 25 to 35%. For Devoured Loop, change to grant 1 charge per proc per skill. The devs note, like in the original Remnant, Devouring Loop was providing far too much power with the flip of a coin. They reined it in. For Digested Hog Lore, they increased the duration from 5 to 7 seconds. For Dran Scavenger Ring, they increased the healing amount from 15% to 50% max health over 30 seconds. Dried Clay Ring also getting a nerf, reducing all damage gain from Bulwark from 60 to 50%. Elevated Ring sees an incredible buff, increasing encumbrance reduction from -5 to -10, and increased dodge threshold from +5 to +10. 100% power increase. For Embrace of Shahala, increased damage reduction from 5 to 7.5% per negative status or blight, added interaction with slow, and reduced the max stacks from 5 to 2. 5 never felt attainable, so great change. And Daria's Endless Loop reduced time trigger from 2 to 1 seconds, and increased health regen from 1.5 to 2. Bay Hunter Ring, increased range bonus from 30 to 35%. Balin's Sigil, increased mod generation from 10 to 15%. Bayron's Sigil, increased mod generation from 10% to 12.5%. Firestone, increased fire damage bonus from 10 to 12%. Focusing Shard, increased spread reduction from 30 to 70%, and increased duration from 3 to 4 seconds. Wait, 70% is nuts! The devs note that smaller value changes didn't have much of an effect on Focusing Shard, so we went in the other direction. Extreme! Frivolous Band getting a slight nerf, reducing duration from 10 to 7 seconds. Galvanized Resupply Band increases ammo pickups from 50 to 100%. There's a lot of options in getting ammo now. Devs note that, they hope you have big pockets. Grounding Stone increases shock damage bonus from 10 to 12%. Jewel of the Beholding sees a duration increase from 10 to 15 seconds. Lighthouse Keeper's Ring increased mod per second from 3 to 4 per stack, and increased range from 10 to 15 meters. Metal Driver increases duration from 7 to 15 seconds, and increased bonus reload speed from 5 to 10%. Momentum Driver reduced sprint duration requirement from 2 seconds to 1.5 seconds. Outcast Ring reduced duration from 15 to 10 seconds. Painless Obsidian added 1 stack of Bulwark while Grey Health is present, in addition to Haste. Devs state that they're trying to convert us to use Grey Health builds. Bulwark and Haste for any Grey Health is not a bad deal. Point Focus Ring increased spread and recoil reduction bonus from 25 to 30%. Power Saver increased save chance from 25 to 35%. Probability Cord, thank you, reduced critical damage bonus from 30 to 20%. Yeah, way too strong, agreed. But seriously, the value of this ring was dominating every other option. It's fairer now and opens the door to other choices as well. I love that, man. You already know they're doing the same for Xanias. Revisioner's Ring increased the rate at which stowed weapons auto-reload. Reaping Stone increased lifesteal amount from 3 to 5%. Reserve Boosting Gem increased base regen from 0.333 to 0.5, and increased max regen from 2 to 2.5. Ring of the Damned, they changed it to grant 0.4% all damage for each 1% Grey Health, and they added a 5% critical chance when the wearer has 50% or more Grey Health. The devs note that they really want you to use Grey Health builds. The damage bonus can go much higher than before, depending on how much Grey Health you have. The crit bonus is an extra little something for your efforts. They really want you to use it. Ring of Deflection increased deflect chance from 35 to 50%. Ring of Restocking increased duration from 1.5 to 5 seconds, huge. Ring of Retribution, damage and reload mod from 10% to 15%. I believe this is supposed to be Worn Admiral's Ring, but they increased the all damage bonus from 10 to 15%. Ring of the Vein, they reduced iframe reduction from 50 to 35%. They stated we like the concept of don't evade builds, but the penalty on the Ring of Vein was quite punishing. It still hurts, but it's not nearly as bad. For Sapphire Dreamstone, they increased the skill cooldown refund from 3 to 4%. Shadestone gets a slight buff from 12 to 15% skill damage bonus. For Shiny Hoglore, they increased range from 25 to 30 to 25 to 50 mod power gained. And they disabled the effect from working with the Cube Gun automatic bullet return. RIP, dude. Damn. For Singe Ring, they also changed this to additive damage bonus instead of multiplicative, and they increased the bonus from 10 to 12%. The devs stated that Singe was changed to additive to bring it close to other damage ring options. For Soul Shard, they increased damage bonus from 4 to 5% per summon, and increased max damage bonus from 12 to 15%. For Stockpile Charger, they increased the damage bonus from 13 to 15%. For Stone of Continuance, they break my heart endlessly and reduce the skill duration from 25 to 15%. That makes me very sad. For Stone of Expanse, they reduced all other damage penalty from 6 to 5%. Stream Coupler getting a major buff for skills, increased healing amount from 10 to 25% of max health, and increased duration from 5 to 10 seconds. For Tempest Conduit, reduced duration from 20 seconds to 15 seconds. They also increased the damage bonus from 10 to 15%. For Tomb Dweller's Ring, increased duration from 10 to 15 seconds, and increased fall damage reduction from 25 to 50%. For Vestige of Power, reduced time to proc from 7 to 5 seconds. The devs note that it's part of the consolidation of don't get hit durations, a similar change that Necklace of Supremacy received. Unnecessary Evil, Xania's Malice definitely needed a nerf. They increased the stacks from 3 to 4, reduced the bonus per stack from 10 to 5%, and reduced the duration from 7 to 5 seconds. It had to happen, guys. It's still really good. The final ring, Zohe's Ring, increases mod duration from 15 to 20%. Moving on to Relics, the devs state that Relics have turned out to be a fan-favorite addition to the Remnant franchise. In this patch, we made some adjustments to make certain relics more thematic, and we have our sights on even more relic adjustments for the future. For Broken Heart, increased speed at which 50% health is granted on use, added innate -2 health regen above 50% health, and disabled interaction with other healing items. To complete the broken theme, we disabled the interaction with healing bonuses. We also enabled a constant degeneration so that if you're above 50% health, you'll slowly return to it. It's a very interesting relic that can be used for a quick heal while still working well with 50% health builds. Very true. Lifeless Heart is super cool now. They removed all healing and added a 50% use speed bonus. They state that it's another thematic change. Lifeless Heart no longer grants any innate healing, but is much faster. It's a good choice for relic perk and on-relic use builds. Yeah, I'd say so. For Paper Heart, they definitely buffed the shit out of it. Heals 100% of max health over 0.1 seconds. Still grants you 10 stacks of Paper Heart for 10 seconds. Dealing 75 base damage of any type removes 1 stack of paper health. And after 15 seconds, remaining stacks are converted to gray health, 10% per stack. The devs note that, like anything related to Laywise, Paper Heart is fake. To better represent the phony nature of the heart, we cleaned up how the stacking behavior works. Dealing base damage will remove stacks, and if any of them remain after the timer ends, they're converted into gray health. Which may not be a bad thing. They're really pushing the gray health thing, man, but they're kinda onto something here. For Salvaged Heart, they reduced the use speed bonus from 50 to 25%. They said it was doing a little too much, so they gave it to Lifeless Heart to spark more variety. Salvage is still doing a lot. The final relic, Tormented Heart, fixed a bug causing irregular damage scaling, increased use speed from 20 to 25%, reduced lifesteal amount from 25 to 20%, and it properly scales with lifesteal and lifesteal efficacy bonuses. The devs note that they're mostly fixing weird behavior, but also making sure that Tormented Heart benefits from other lifesteal bonuses. The final category we need to go over is Relic Fragments. The devs state that we have a more comprehensive Relic Fragment update coming soon. Oh shit. Some small adjustments were made for this patch to set a more balanced foundation. This also coincides with our large overhaul of many and most trinkets in the game. These are pretty much all nerfs. No, these are all nerfs. Armor effectiveness down from 15 to 10%. Melee critical damage down to 15% from 20%. Range critical chance reduced from 10% to 7.5%. Range critical damage reduced max from 20 to 15%. Skill duration again, reduced max from 15 to 10%. And finally, weapon spread, reduced max from 20 to 15%. It's currently like 5:30 in the morning and my throat is so dry from talking. If you stuck it out this long, man, I'm impressed. Remnant is headed in such a beautiful direction, and I can't thank you guys enough for your support. As a reminder, make sure to check out the other half of the patch notes in my video listed in the description box, if you haven't already. Comment down below your thoughts on these absolutely ginormous patch notes, and make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks, guys.